All right, we got a lot of trades to catch up on, and literally as we're trying to catch up, we've got more in front of us. I feel like we're running on a treadmill here, but in the best way possible. We are waiting on the return of the Jazz Chisholm deal as we're recording. We had to hit the record button anyways because I got a plane to catch, but we're going to get through these other trades because there's a handful. It's great to see the deadline already heating up, and we've got a lot of prospects changing hands here. What I love, Jack, is this is an opportunity for us to kind of talk about maybe some prospects that we have not discussed too much because they were 2023 draftees, maybe players that don't have as much coverage outside of maybe right after the draft. So get to add some context there and just a lot of fun, maybe a little bit surprising swaps and interesting prospects that have been moved. We got a lot of trades to discuss, and this is some of my favorite time of the year on the call up because it gives us another opportunity to talk about prospects that maybe we weren't checking in on as much. And now we can endear them to a new fan base and tell them what they're getting here.
Yeah, it takes something like this to kind of shine the spotlight on them. You know, if you're OPSing 1,000, we're going to talk about you. If you are, the headliner of a return for a superstar player in a trade, chances are we've talked about you a lot because you're a top 100 prospect. But a guy like Andrew Pintar, we haven't talked about, but he provides some value going to Miami. A guy like Josh Rivera, I know has had a down year, but Toronto could be somewhat excited about what they're getting in a guy like that. So it's a good chance to shine light on guys that, we really only bring up when we do the honorable mentions or 11 to 15 in a team system. So it gives them, some due pub there.
Yep. Absolutely. And I'm still so eagerly awaiting what the Yankees Marlins trade breakdown is going to look like. And I know we're going to get that by the time we get to the back end of the episode. So we'll save Jazz to the Yankees for last. But we'll I guess, kind of go in chronological order here, Jack, and go through each of them. I know there's a couple prospects that you're very excited about, some sneaky arms that are going, one in particular that's going over to Tampa. Of course, Tampa is going to be able to do these kinds of things where they identify well. People may look at the, some of the basic, maybe not totally updated rankings and say, oh, what is this return? I'm telling you, some of these players are due for a bump in updates, especially some of them that are going to the Rays here. And we're not just saying that because it's the Rays. We always talk about not just always giving them credit for being the Rays, but it's a couple prospects that I know as you dug more into have been really exciting. And there's some other deals too that I think are better than the write-ups may suggest. Like we're still in the process of updating a lot of our prospect rankings. So what may be shown on the website may not fully be, how high we are on these guys and how high we're going to be in the updates. So we'll try to catch you up on that. And, Jack, as always, is going to walk us through each of these deals.
Yep. And we'll start with the AJ Puck deal, which was kind of the first one. That was the first, shoe to drop or hat to drop? Is it shoe to drop?
I think it's shoe.
It never made any sense. Is somebody floating? Why would a shoe drop or shoe to fall? I don't know. But the first shoe to drop, we'll roll with it, was AJ Puck going from the Marlins to the Diamondbacks for Deyvison De Los Santos and Andrew Pintar. And I want to start with Deyvison De Los Santos because this is a guy that we've talked about a lot so far this year. Mm-hmm. 87 games between double and triple. I know they're two of the more hitter-friendly environments in all of minor league baseball, but Deyvison De Los Santos, after he went to spring training in Arizona, is back with the Arizona Diamondbacks. He went to spring training with the Guardians, but Deyvison in 87 games between double and triple, slashing 325, 376, 635. That's a 10-11 OPS, 28 homers, 84 driven in 87 games. On the stat sheet, he's been the best hitter in minor league baseball so far this year. You cannot argue with 325 and 28 pumps in 87 games. They got a corner masher. I don't know what Miami's plan with Josh Bell is, but if Josh Bell gets moved, if the market is there and it comes to fruition and Bell can go elsewhere for a return, I think Deyvison De Los Santos is going to be playing first for the Marlins any minute now.
Yeah, and he's assigned to AAA. I think it's just going to be in the meantime while they continue to clear up spots on that roster. I think it'll only be a few games, but it's crazy that De Los Santos just turned 21 and he's already had this progression here where he's been returned from the Rule 5, already had a little bit of experience with the big league team, has already played plenty of games at the upper levels, demolished through AA competition, and then has done what he's done in AAA. I saw the initial reaction, and this is one that I think, some people are like, what in the world are the D-backs doing? First, AJ Puck's numbers are better than what meets the eye. Since he's moved to the bullpen, back to the bullpen where he should have always been. He adjusted some release components, and he was dynamite over the last couple weeks. And I think 20 innings, he had only walked 3. And I mean, I think opponents were hitting like 0.59 against him. It was just pure domination from Puck, and he has 2 years plus of control, 2.5 years of control. So I think he carries a little bit more value than people may have thought, because the numbers on the surface don't look great. But the other side of it is, I don't think De Los Santos is as valuable as people think. And that's not to say that it's not a great trade for the Marlins. It is great. Pintar's an athletic center fielder that they could add to the fold, which is great. And a guy that can turn in almost double plus run times. And De Los Santos is that high upside bat that they need to accumulate, right? This is a reliever that they traded, and a reliever that's often injured and just failed as a starter has been great. And I think it's a great time for the D-backs to add him in here. But again, like, De Los Santos is a good return for AJ Puck. I don't think people are totally looking at the underlying side of things. And, there was a lot of shock and awe from people saying, what in the world are the D-backs doing? There's not a lot of precedent for hitters with Deyvison De Los Santos' batted ball profile having success in the major leagues. It's not to say he can't fix that and continue to progress. And you can't ignore the 1,000 OPS. But there's just not a lot of guys that are running, a 40+% chase rate, a 20% swinging strike rate, an end zone contact rate of 76%, and a ground ball rate that flirts with 50%, and translating to the major leagues. It's amazing that he's been as productive as he has been. And I think that he's a great get for the Marlins and an opportunity to potentially be a productive bat. Again, he's only 21. But I do think the context here is important. Like, there's a reason why the Guardians returned him. There's a reason why he was traded for a reliever. He's good. He's exciting. There's a lot to dream on, and it's a great get for the Marlins. But there's a lot of red flags, and there's not a lot of precedent of a player with Deyvison De Los Santos' batted ball profile and just plate discipline succeeding at the highest level. Not saying he can't, but there's a reason. An
exciting player can make you pull your hair out. Like, those go hand in hand. And more often than not, the electrifying players, quote unquote, of Major League Baseball make you pull your hair out at times. And I know that, like, Javi Baez finished second or third in NL MVP voting in 18 or 19, I want to say. And even then, there were 2-week stretches in that year where it's like, dude, what are you swinging at? And obviously those have been exacerbated, in Detroit. And, those were clearly an issue as recently as 21 with the Cubs. But there are a lot of other really talented hitters that make you want to pull your hair out. Luis Robert in Chicago, like, that's a guy that will go through week or 2 stretches where it's like, dude, what are you swinging at? There's a chance that Deyvison can have a 5-homer week in the big leagues. There's also a chance that he makes you go gray within a week.
And not walking puts a lot of pressure on that bat. And the difference is, like, even a Javi Baez, like, the contact rates when he was going right were pretty good. And that's where, like, for De Los Santos, it's going to be interesting. But at the same time, 21 years old, some of the best EVs in the minor leagues, 90th percentile of 109. The Marlins don't have anybody in that system really right now that has that kind of offensive upside. They can afford to be patient with him. Who cares if he's terrible at the big league level the rest of the year? And I don't think he will be. But, like, let's say he just really struggles and is overmatched to a degree. Who cares? Like, he can progress, and then you get another opportunity next year. He's going to start the year with them in opening day and see how it goes. He's 21, just turned 21. So I love the get for the Marlins, but for those that are, like, fully just saying, what in the world are the D-backs doing? I think it is a little bit of a reminder that, maybe there's not as much value placed on him by teams than some may think. And remember, he was unprotected in the Rule 5, then returned. And so it's a guy that they would have to have on the 40-man roster anyways moving forward. And I just don't think they felt the need there. Pintar, before we forget, though, too, I know another guy that I think the D-backs are probably looking at him and saying, okay, well, the underlying data, points towards him maybe outperforming some of what he is already doing right now. But again, the Marlins get an athletic player, a guy that can potentially stick up the middle and has put up solid numbers overall. He's 23. We'll see how he does as he continues to handle the upper levels, but another solid get for the Marlins and just 2 guys that, in terms of bat and upside, they needed sorely. You just need to accumulate upside and hope that a few of these guys hit. And I still think De Los Santos, if he is able to rein in the really egregious chase rates against secondary stuff and things like that, I think he can really progress. The one other thing that I really like is, his environment. It's Reno, right, in AAA for the D-backs. Like that's only like 900 feet below Coors, if I'm not mistaken. That's one of the more hitter-friendly environments, even in the PCL. But he is hitting every single ballpark this year, so that does bode well. And he hit really well in the Texas League, which is favorable, but not nearly to the same degree. It's not really a matter, I think, of the environment for him. Like when he connects, it is crushed. And I talked about it. I circulated a thread. I saw it started to pick up steam again that we put together in the around the time of the Rule 5 draft when he was selected last year. He made some swing adjustments in the second half of last season that really put him on a trajectory that has really not stopped. And we're seeing it continuously now. So those swing adjustments are really encouraging. It shows that he can continue to make just progress and be malleable as such a raw hitter. You love to see that, and you hope that he can maybe make one more adjustment that'll allow him to get to the big leagues and succeed there. But I love what we saw from him in the second half of last year, making those adjustments that I think bodes well for maybe his ability to do that again at the big league level, because he's probably going to need one more adjustment.
Yeah. You mentioned Pintar a little bit, 2.5 months in high A this year, 304, 403, 516 slash. You combine his 10 games in double A and I think 2 games at the complex, just ramping up, 19 for 20 in the stolen base department, and he's not punching. So, you have value elsewhere, even if he's outperforming some of the peripherals that come with playing in a hitter-friendly environment in Hillsborough.
Yep. Yeah. And I think it's going to be a fun test. And it's just the fact the Marlins can put somebody out there. Even now we're talking about an athletic outfielder. They don't even have a lot of those guys. So just having that in the fold as well in Double A. I love that you brought up the stolen bases, that aspect of things. It should be fun. It's going to be a different environment, and it might be a little bit jarring for him there. But I'm excited to see how it looks. And again, they're just continuing to accumulate some of these 45 potential 45 future value guys as well, like the 2 and 3 pieces in the Luis Arias deal. And the Marlins need those guys too. So it'll be interesting to see how Pintar adjusts to the Southern League.
Yeah. All right, we will jump to the Randy Arozarena deal, and we'll work player by player here. The return was Aidan Smith and Brody Hopkins, and a player to be named later. Before Smith and Hopkins, player to be named later, in all likelihood, is going to be someone from this draft class for the Mariners, which we lauded as being one of the better draft classes in baseball. So that is going to be, I think, a pretty solid return, that player to be named later.
Yeah, which makes it fun, and it's also killing me. I want to know who it is.
And you won't know until December, probably.
Yeah, I wonder if it's one of those things where it's you can pick from 2 guys in our draft class, or if they already know who it is and they're just waiting. That whole process.
I bet they agreed. Who was it? The Padres. The Nats knew that they were acquiring Trey Turner when he was the player to be named later. Turner was technically a player to be named later. And he was traded, I want to say 4 months after being drafted, because you have to wait till the end of that season to be drafted or to be traded after you're drafted. So I'm sure they know who the guy is, but it's going to be a little secret, and we're going to find out in November, December. But we do know 2 of them, and that's Aidan Smith and Brody Hopkins. We'll start with Aidan Smith here. 77 games with Modesto. He was kind of buried underneath Farmelo, Emerson, Pete, Montes. By the way, Aidan Smith was on that team too, and in 77 games, he slashed 284, 402, 470. 9 homers, but 26 doubles in 77 games, 28 stolen bases as well. This guy, 4th-round pick last year at a high school in Texas. He certainly looks the part, huh?
He's been awesome. And the glove, he can go get it in center field. So that the Rays love that. They love the defensive ability in center field, and the bat can come along. Underlying batted ball data in terms of just the contact rates, there's a little bit more whiff than I think would meet the eye, but also you're seeing a 24% K rate so far this year. So maybe it's about what you would expect, but he hedges that with a really good approach. The EVs are fringy at this point, but he's young, as you mentioned, just turned I think 4 days ago. So when you have that approach, he elevates consistently. I mean, it's a guy that's, I think, 34% ground ball rate, and he can go get it in center field. This is a really good addition for the Rays. And this is another one of those examples of a guy that, probably is going to be underrated by fans as they perceive the trade, because I don't think lists have been able to fully adjust to what he has already done and just the performance so far. I think what the Rays probably love the most about this guy, is they probably plug him into their models, is he pulls the ball in the air consistently. We talk Isaac Paredes, right? And other players that they have identified that have been able to do that. Aidan Smith is a guy that pulls the ball in the air with consistency, and that's going to help him overcome what's kind of, at this point, fringy to average EVs. So doing that with a great glove in center field, I think it's a really fun get for the Rays, and he's a guy that I expect to continue to climb on prospect lists and have a lot more intrigue there.
Another really fun get for the Rays was Brody Hopkins, who's a pitching prospect in low A. Hopkins is throwing the shit out of the ball right now. Brody Hopkins, 18 starts with Modesto, so low A level. And yeah, he's 22 years old. He was a college guy last year, but a 2.9 ERA, 83 2/3 innings, 10 strikeouts per 9, 4.5 walks per 9. Opponents, hitting in the low 200s against him, 62 hits and 83 2/3 innings. Context: he was at the College of Charleston for his first 2 years of college. He was hitter exclusive his first year of college. Second year of college, 2 appearances out of the bullpen for them. College of Charleston, it didn't go too well in 2022. I think he was hurt. He transfers to Winthrop. 49 games at Winthrop last year. He OPS'd 906, 9 homers. He also threw 54 innings. He walked 7.5 hitters per 9. And the Mariners took him and turned him into a pitcher. What does that tell you? That tells you that they were dreaming on something.
Yeah.
And they've gotten a much more advanced pitcher than I think anybody was expecting when they took Brody Hopkins in the 6th round last year out of Winthrop. I was crushing the tape on this guy. Yeah. I was watching the video. Did you see more Ben Joyce or Luis Castillo?
I saw that Ben Joyce delivery that you alluded to on with your tweet. I love seeing you tweet video like that side by side. Like that was auto retweet from me. Like the second I see Jack tweeting out video, cutting up the tape, you're getting a retweet from me.
But the thing is, you're only getting it if it's like, oh, this guy's trying to do that impression. Like Nick Gonzalez tries to do a Mike Trout impression, so like it looks the same, and I'll tweet that out. Tamar Johnson, I think it was David Ortiz or something, and I was like, oh yeah, it makes a lot of sense. But Brody Hopkins, like it is actually cut and paste Ben Joyce. So this guy has starter endurance. Like he's in his first year of pitching full time, and he's going 6 innings constantly.
Yep. Last time out, 6 innings at San Jose, 4 hits, no runs, 2 walks, 8 Ks. How about the walks, though? Like, as you mentioned, like continuing to cut those down. Could he be better? Sure. But with how far he's come from college already, and Winthrop's, churned out some sneaky talent through the years. Yeah. Like I again, it's just another one of those like schools that you'd be surprised. They've had some good players come out of there. But what's amazing with Hopkins is, okay, what do you think his release height is? He's 6'3".
I think it's really low because it's almost like a shotgun sidearm.
What do you think it is? And for context for the listener, major league average release height's about 5'9".
Yeah, I think it's probably 5'3".
4'9".
Damn.
So being able to get that low and that far down on the mound, he gets average extension, and he has 2 fastballs. He has a 4-seamer, and then he has a 2-seamer. From that release point, and the 2-seamers from an even lower release point, so it really runs. So you have to worry about this low release fastball where the carry just plays up way more than I think the perceived carry is just ridiculous. And then you're worried about that at the top, and then other times it's just going to be boring in on your hands. That is a really uncomfortable at bat just from a fastball perspective, and those 2 pitches alone. But then he can also give you this slider that, as you can imagine from that release point, is an absolute problem for hitters too. By the way, also has a curveball that he mixes in, a changeup that he mixes in, and both have been inconsistent from a strike perspective, but have performed really well. 2 organizations that are really good at identifying unique arms and maximizing them, both loved this guy. And I'm sure it hurt the Mariners to let him go. I'd almost wonder if it hurt them as much as parting with Aidan Smith, maybe even more considering how many position players they have in their pitching situation. But, you get an opportunity to get Randy Arozarena with some control, you go do it. But Hopkins is a guy that I think we're going to see a lot of helium because between the 60% ground ball rate and a strikeout rate that's 27%, it really comes down to the command for me. And worst case, he goes to the bullpen and he ends up being elite there. But to your point, I think he's got a great chance of being a starter with the way he's been able to show that he can handle being stretched out a little bit more, being able to get ground balls and whiffs. It's just going to come down to, can he elevate that strike rate from 59% to at least like the mid 60s. And that's kind of the one thing we're waiting on. But you know what? He hasn't been doing this that long, and he's a great athlete on the mound, clearly.
So Cespedes Family Barbecue, our king Jordan Schusterman is a Seattle Mariners fan and a big one. And he tweeted from that account, he quote tweeted Mark Topkin, who's the Rays beat writer at the Tampa Bay Times, said this is going to look like an absolute robbery to most people because the Rays are getting a Rosarena for who? Like, again, it's 12 and 22, and you see that and it's like, oh, what the hell? But Smith is good. I bet the player to be named later will be a non-insignificant piece. And Jordan said, I cannot stress how much the Mariners loved Brody Hopkins. And then Ryan Divish, who's the Mariners beat reporter for the Seattle Times. Is it Seattle Times?
I believe so.
Yeah, he's like the main Mariners beat reporter. He just replied and said, this was a painful return package for them.
Really? So it's so fun. I never even saw that. And just looking at the characteristics and the way that, we talk about how much they love the low release guys too in Seattle. I just figured that it had to be difficult. Like it had to really hurt them. And it had to be a guy like a Rosarena who, when he gets hot, he can just put a team on his back as much as
especially in postseason. Yeah,
exactly. They just had to do it. And I'm glad that the Mariners did that. Teams should do it. It should hurt sometimes.
Yes.
Like, if you want to win, it should hurt sometimes.
Dude.
And at the end of the day, Brody Hopkins is in low A and he's 22. I love what we've seen so far, but he's in low A and he's 22. You can't let that stop you from adding a piece that could put you, I wouldn't say over the top, but at least get you going to where you need to be, which is, the Mariners haven't even really put together a solid playoff run in a long time. So, that would be a really nice outcome here. But regardless, the Rays, they acquire 2 prospects here that they don't have to add to the 40-man for a very long time, which is what they love to do. So it's a win-win for both sides. This is how the Rays like to do this thing, but it works really well for them. Guys that they can progress through the minor leagues at the pace that they want and don't have the pressure of having to add them to the 40-man. They're going to have a lot more openings and availability to be able to fill up that 40-man and protect the right prospects.
And I sound like a broken record during trade season, but I always want to make sure I say, you got to give to get. Like, if you want Randy Arozarena, you have to give up something that might sting a little bit, and this could very well sting. Last thing on this package, do you still have Hopkins' game logs up?
Yes, I do.
His game log, his first start of the year, again, I think he's made 18 starts this year with Modesto. His first start of the year, he allowed 4 earned runs. How many times has he done that since then?
First start of the year, he allowed 4. He's done it. Earned runs, he has not done it since. He had 2 starts where it was 4 runs, but 4 earned, has not done that since.
Let that sit for a minute.
Yep.
This guy's pitching full time for the first time in his life. He's made 18 starts. The first one was the worst by earned runs.
Mm-hmm. Can I give you one more crazy thing too?
Mm-hmm.
You talk about how he's taken on more innings than he ever has. His last time out, he threw 82 pitches, which would make it 6 straight starts with 80-plus pitches. Highest average fastball velocity was his last time out, 96.2 miles per hour. He's been mostly 95-ish the whole year. It was 95.6 the start before that, and 96.2 in his last start. So it looks like he's not even slowing down right now.
Yeah. All right. We'll jump to the Nate Pearson deal that sent him from Toronto.
That's not the Nate Pearson deal. That's the Yohendrick Pinango deal.
I think so. I'm struggling to make any sense of this one at all. Nate Pearson, I think the Cubs are buying into the lowercase x thing. They're buying into the xERA and the xFIP.
The plus thing, too. The stuff plus.
Okay, so you buy into the X and the plus. Guess what? You're the cellar dweller in the National League Central, and you just gave up a guy that is having his breakout season and a guy that was contending with Dylan Cruz for SEC Player of the Year last year in Josh Rivera. We're going to get to Rivera after Pinango. Pinango is obviously the headliner in this. The Blue Jays, again, I know you are super anti-declaring a winner and a loser at time of trade, but our reactions lined up identically. This was a Blue Jay win.
I mean, yeah, you're just cashing in on Nate Pearson, who I mean, I hope he can stay healthy, and this has been a healthier stretch for him. But it's not only about the ability; it's also about the ability to stay healthy. Like I get the Cubs trying to add an arm here that they like to try to add these undervalued arms, develop them. I mean, that's kind of the Breslow model, and I'm sure Hoyer, kind of following suit. And I think the big part of this was that Pinango is going to need to be added to the 40 man, and I think with the Cubs kind of staring that in the face, this was kind of them saying, hey, we don't really have room for him on the 40. So we're going to need to cash in on him now. And let's go get an arm that we can maybe turn into, something more valuable. So I get it from that lens, especially when you look at the state of their kind of pitching at the big league level and like just big league ready arms there. And maybe you hope that it can turn into something similar to what they were getting in flashes from Ben Brown. I think that's very ambitious. But I think it was mostly the 40-man situation where they felt like a 22-year-old Pinango who just turned 22 after the start of the season was not going to really fit into their 40-man plans. But to me, for the Blue Jays, no brainer. I know he has been slumping in Double-A, but at the same time, he has also still flashed some monster exit velocities. There's still a lot of underlying batted ball data to love. He's a bit too aggressive. And, I think we've clearly seen that we've been waiting for a while for the batted ball data to translate. It really did in his, like third or fourth stint in high A. And he's had really good stretches for like a week or whatever in Double-A, but he just hasn't been able to string them together. I still think it's a good get for the Jays who just need any upside they can add similar to the Marlins in that system. And at 22 years old, Pinango offers plus power easily, at least plus raw power easily. And has shown the ability to make, at least average contact. So I like the get for them for, again, Nate Pearson. I don't think they're going to miss him too much.
No, I don't think so. Another guy that I really like the get for is Josh Rivera. Josh Rivera was the second piece of that. I know he's been really not good in Double-A this year. He's hitting a .169 with a .537 OPS in Double-A. Like it's been really bad for him. But he is a year removed from, again, possibly being the second best hitter in the SEC last year, only behind Dylan Cruz. This guy hit .348 with a .1064 OPS at Florida last year. He was a third-round pick of the Cubs last year. He played 25 games in high A. He spent a month in South Bend last year. He had a .720 OPS, hit .250 with 2 pumps. I don't think this guy's a zero. The fact that you got Pinango and for Nate Pearson, who, okay, lowercase x aside, this guy has a 5.7 in the bullpen, and we're on year 4 of this.
Yeah.
This is a great cherry.
And it's a success story because he's healthy at this point. So, yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think he really is kind of just that cherry on top, and you hope that maybe with some instruction and a new set of eyeballs on him, maybe they can get that swing right. But, I mean, the EVs aren't bad. He can play a solid shortstop. He doesn't chase. The X when it comes to expected stats for Rivera are stronger than what you've seen, but it's hard for them not be when you're hitting a .169. It's been a disaster this year. But at the same time, I agree. Like they got another player and not a guy that they have to worry about, on the roster side as much either with the 40 man, but it is surprising to see them move on from that quickly. Maybe that's the Cubs saying, hey, we don't really think that he's going to get it together offensively. Yeah. That's very, very possible, but worth a flyer here. I think Pinango is the guy that they were excited to grab, but who knows? Maybe Rivera can figure things out and be a bench player.
No doubt. Okay, we go to another Blue Jay deal. It was the Jimmy Garcia deal that sent Jimmy Garcia to Seattle for Jonatan Clase and Jacob Sharp, a minor league catcher. We'll start with Clase, and then we'll go quick on Sharp because he's relatively unknown. Clase was a guy that got up for his first taste of big league ball last year. He repped the Mariners in the Futures game in Seattle last year. Clase last year, 129 games, 79 bags, and an 800 OPS between high A and for the most part in double. This year, 19 games in Seattle, he's been thoroughly overmatched, but 59 games in Tacoma, he's got an 850 OPS. He has 10 homers. And again, hitter-friendly environment, I know, but 10 homers and 26 bags in 59 games? Sure, I'll take it. The Blue Jays added a guy that can, at the very least, be speed and defense at the big league level for them right now as they sit 10 games under 500, 11 games under 500. It's horrible in Toronto right now, and they have a guy that will make the wipe the slate clean and start over a little bit easier to watch.
Yeah, it's just a potential piece, right? You're hoping that and also just 22. You're hoping that he hits enough to be a regular in the outfield and be a guy that can play all three. But I also think if you're the Blue Jays and you're trying to do a more expedited rebuild, you just need 26-man roster spot players. Like, and Clase is definitely that. At the least, he's a fourth outfielder, I think, with the speed, with the sneaky impact, with the way that he's able to elevate. And he does make enough contact when he's going right. I think there's times where the approach and just the very uphill swing can kind of take him out of it. But again, 22 years old, he's already shown that even with some flaws and like warts to his approach and swing, he can still be productive at the upper levels. Just the Blue Jays should be accumulating players that they can plug in when the Kevin Kiermaier's and the Justin Turners and the Danny Jansen's and all these guys are gone. You know, they have a lot of upper minors guys that I think can be interesting. And I don't think this has to be a full-fledged teardown. So I liked for a reliever, instead of getting a lotto ticket, you get a guy that still has some intrigue to him where like things could click and he could have a little bit more upside, but at the very least, you feel good about him being a fourth outfielder and another solid contributor and just piece in that roster. So I think that's the way that the Blue Jays should go about this, fill out the roster. And then, you know, with some of the money coming off the books, they can go sign some free agents and expedite this whole thing. I want to see more Addison Barger, and I want to see Davis Schneider playing every day. I want to see Elvis when he's off of, you know, the suspension playing every day. Go young and lean into that. And I think Clase is a solid piece to get for, you know, a reliever here in Garcia, was banged up before, made it back in time. But, you know, I think it's not a bad get.
Yeah. Other guy in this deal was Jacob Sharp, a catcher. 17th round pick out of UNLV last year. Sharp hit .330 with an OPS over 1,000 in the Mountain West. Hit a friendly environment. Like, I hate offering that precursor all the time, but it's really important to note. Like, he was really good last year, but he did it in a very hitter-friendly environment, and it was, you know, kind of a one-year pop-up thing, which is what, you know, made him a 17th round draft pick. Jacob Sharp, 44 games in low A this year, 22-year-old catcher in low A, a 770 OPS, 6 homers. He's punched out 19 times in 191 plate appearances. Another wrinkle. Older 22-year-old, 22 and 316 days from Whittier, California. That lines up perfectly to be catching Jared Jones and Paul Skeens growing up. I bet he caught Jones a lot growing up because Jones is like 22 and 340 from Whittier, California.
And that would be fun. We'll have to dig in on that and find out. But look, he could be a backup catcher. It's always worth grabbing these guys as a complimentary piece in the deal because it's very
Blake Hunt. Like Blake Hunt. I shout out Sam Hilliard adjacents all the time. This is a Blake Hunt adjacent, right?
Yeah. At the very least, he's a solid catcher for you in your org, but there's a chance he could develop into a backup catcher. He makes a lot of contact, as you could tell with the strikeout rate. He doesn't chase. I can't pretend to tell you I know anything about his defense, but as long as it's good enough to just be a catcher, it's a guy that could be a backup. And, you know, again, it's just a throw in a deal, and not bad to get.
Zach Eflin is on the move. Arozarena gone. Yandy Diaz rumored. Apparently the Rangers want Isaac Paredes. That's a Just Baseball Show conversation, but dude, if the Rangers got Isaac Paredes, that screams panic about Josh Young. But it also would be an awesome get for the Texas Rangers. But the Rays move Zach Eflin to Baltimore. Intra-division, Eflin, his price increases drastically next year. They always do this. They escalate big, and they trade him before he escalates. Eflin to Baltimore for Mac Horvath, Jackson Baumeister, and Matthew Etzel. Let's start with Horvath, who was an early round pick last year, the outfielder. Mac Horvath was certainly surplus in that Orioles system, but second round pick out of Carolina. He shared the outfield with Vance Honeycutt. By the way, they took him. They took his teammate in the first round. But Horvath goes from Baltimore to Tampa, 71 games this season in Aberdeen, which is high A for Baltimore. 233, 745 OPS, 9 homers, 26 for 27 in the stolen base department. So he's tooled out clearly. What drags behind? Is it the hit tool?
It's a weird thing for me because like there's nothing that fully jumps off the page. It's almost sometimes the batted ball components, I feel like, where he does make enough contact, but it just the quality of contact is very inconsistent. And I think that's kind of the biggest struggle for him. So I guess you can kind of tie that into the hit tool overall. And I guess it's hit tool and lack of impact at times. Like he'll flash it, but he just can't get into it too consistently. And I think it's another swing that's similar to Clase, probably too consistently uphill, which takes him out against secondary stuff and has made him a little bit, struggle a little bit against changeups and breaking balls. And I think that's been sometimes the trouble. And then high fastballs also kind of chewing him up. But what I like about Horvath is this is a piece that you feel like has a good chance to at least be that kind of super utility type. You mentioned the speed, the stolen base ability, can play all over. And there's some aspects to the offensive profile that, are endearing, right? Like it's an 84% in zone contact. He only chases at a 21% clip. We'll see if he can sustain that against more challenging competition at the upper levels. But I think he's a fun upside play when he can play center. He can play third. He can play right. He can play second. Like, that's fun. And he has been swinging it a lot better of late, shaking off a really slow start. I think we've seen him a little bit better over his last 15 or so games. See if he can carry that into a new arc.
I'm a Jackson Baumeister truther. And again, I hate that I'm doing this where it's like, oh, the Rays got a sick pitcher in Brody Hopkins. Oh, the Rays got a sick pitcher in Jackson Baumeister. But they clearly identified two arms that they are all about getting their hands on. Hopkins, we laid him out. Baumeister is you build a right-handed pitching prospect in a lab, and it probably looks similar to this. 6'4", 225, second-round pick of the O's last year out of Florida State. He was at Florida State. He dealt with some command issues.
Still is.
What?
Still is.
Still is, yeah. I mean, he's walking 5.5 per 9. But this guy, in terms of keeping runs off the board, that's what he does, man. 3.06 ERA and 18 starts in high A. He just turned 22 last month, and he's punching out 11.5 per 9. He is mid-90s heater, low to mid-90s heater, big bending curveball. I mean, it can be nasty when it's right.
And I mean, characteristics are really strong. Surprise, surprise, right, Larry? He's a 5'7" release height, so a little bit below average, but he's getting about 17.5 inches of vert, which is a little bit above average. So that part's nice, but he gets over 7 feet of extension.
Yeah.
So that's well above average. So you have slightly above average in the carry department and the perceived carry, and then you're getting well above average extension. That's a fastball that's going to play even at 93 to 94. That's going to play closer to the plus territory, and that's why, it has performed really well and has picked up a 14% swinging strike rate, which is fantastic for a fastball. What I've been most impressed with is the fact that having that high carry fastball and one that he likes to buzz at the top, he hasn't given up many home runs this year, just 3 homers. The issue has just been the command, and the secondary command in particular. That curveball has got impressive depth, and it's strong, and he's got a changeup that really works well off of his fastball. But the fastball strike rate's 66%. Curveball, changeup, cutter, and slider, which I think the latter two may conflate, strike rate of 50%. That's not great. And really, if you eliminate the cutter, which is more of that fastball throw anyways, it's 49.8% strike rate on those secondaries. So the Rays, again, similar, where you're not going to get a top pitching prospect, but you're going to get a really intriguing one that has a lot of the, like you mentioned, just characteristics as both the pitch stuff and also just his body and the way he goes about his business. Like, there's some mechanical things that could probably help him be more consistent with secondary stuff, but this is a great prototype to be able to build off of and hopefully be able to progress here. You can't really teach that fastball quality. It's hard to do. And in the secondaries, it's not a question of the stuff. It's just the command. We'll see if they can get him right, but there's definitely plenty of upside there.
And it's a moldable prototype too, right? Like, that's, I think, the most important thing where, yeah, it's intriguing, but it's also coachable. And, there are tweaks that you have made with pitchers before. If you have precedent for guys that look like this, you're in a really good spot. And the beauty is there's a ton of precedent for guys that look like this, that are 6'4", 220, extend really well, vert, pretty much everything you're saying. All right, you have a good fastball. Let's find the other shit. And they found it with Glasnow. They found command in general with Glasnow. And I'm not saying that Baumeister is going to turn into Glasnow, but they have experience doing this with bigger right-handed arms that are stuff, but seem to struggle to rein it in. They help guys rein it in.
And another guy that at the very least, if the command doesn't totally come along, he's going to be a good reliever. I do feel good about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Last guy in that deal, outfielder by the name of Matthew Etzel. And Etzel was at Southern Miss, 10th round pick last year out of Southern Miss by Baltimore. He went to the Cape for a little bit, showed decent on the Cape, had a good year at Southern Miss, then hit the ground running in his first 30 pro games last year. 2024, he's split the year between high A Aberdeen and double A Bowie. 810 OPS for him. 289, 41 stolen bases in 83 games. He's got 6 pumps. Bags were like always a thing for him, but power really wasn't. I'm curious what the EVs look like because he's got a grown man beard, like fully a grown man beard. It's insane. He's a young 22, but he looks 30. I'm curious if there's impact here or if it's just simply like, hey, you got a speedy outfielder and it's cool.
Yeah, I think it's kind of more you got a speedy outfielder and it's cool, and the contact rates aren't even that great. It's kind of, it feels like a throw-in. There's just not a lot of bat speed here. The 90th is 101 miles an hour, and even just like watching some of the video, there's just not a lot of whip and violence to the swing. But he's performed pretty well. He can steal some bags. He has been all right so far. So you never know. He's 22, like you said, but I don't know if there's a ton here. It might just kind of be more of like an org filler, and a guy that's okay. He's swinging it pretty well. Let's see what he can do. Kind of third piece. That's probably mostly what Etzel is going to be here, because I just don't know if there's enough impact there for him to be that regular, and I don't know if there's enough defensive utility. Average exit velocity of 85 miles per hour, by the way. So it's just really slows the bat down on secondary stuff.
Yeah, fair. All right, couple of tiny deals. Like, no disrespect, but like small deals before we, inevitably get to the Jazz Chisholm return, which we're still stalling for. Yes. We know it's Agustin Ramirez, and that's about it. Rhylan Thomas was the return to Seattle for Ryan Stanek. Ryan Stanek goes to the Mets. Rhylan Thomas goes from the Mets to Seattle. 24-year-old, 11th round pick of the Mets in 2022 at a USC. This guy, he's kind of split the year between Binghamton and Syracuse. The numbers are fine. He doesn't get on base too much, but he doesn't strike out like ever. He didn't strike out in college. He didn't strike out last year. He didn't strike out this year. So you've got a contact-oriented AAA outfielder that's coming back for Ryan Stanek. I had no idea what the price was going to be for a guy like Stanek, but it's clear that the price was pretty low.
Yeah, and I could get behind it a little bit more in terms of like, oh, maybe he's a sneaky, 4th, 5th outfielder type. If the defense was better, but the defense isn't really great either. So from that lens, it's like, okay, yes, he's very contact oriented. Maybe the glove comes along and he can be that 5th outfielder type, but he does make a lot of contact, chases way too much. EVs are way below average. So it just kind of seemed like that emergency outfielder that's going to kind of fill the AAA roster.
What you know about this guy, Moises Bolivar? So that's the James Paxton return. And note that Paxton was DFA'd, so the price was going to be very, very small. Moises Bolivar just turned 17 on July 8th.
2007, dude.
2007 as a 16-year-old for the most part at the the DSL. 31 games at the DSL. In 270, it's just the classic DSL slash line for a guy like this, where he's playing third base for the most part, but it's 270, 364 on base. He's walking almost as much as he's striking out. Struck out, like 15% of the time, walking like 12% of the time. I'm just reading the stats right now because I'm not even going to pretend that I've heard this 17-year-old's name before.
2007. I haven't seen that before yet. That one really hurts.
July 8th, 07. I remember shit that happened before that.
Vividly. I'm sure there's people listening to this and being like, well, I graduated college in 07. Like, shut up.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, but even for us, like, that's weird. I don't have a ton on him. I can't pretend to. But at the same time, the numbers have been solid. I have literally watching video as I'm speaking to you right now, just so that I can have a little bit of context on this kid. And I will say, like, the swing is pretty clean. A lot of times you see these DSL prospects and it's just so raw and just looks like they're just really playing like they haven't had much instruction, just relying on natural ability. Like, this is a guy that looks like he has some components to his swing that are patterned already pretty well. And the thing is, the Dodgers, they got guys out there, right? Like they're scouting, and if it's somebody that they like, just even some of the basics on, you weren't going to get something significant for a guy that you DFA'd. Though Paxton in the relative world of DFA trades, probably getting somewhat better of a prospect than a lot of other ones. The numbers, as you mentioned, pretty decent. I do think the swing's pretty smooth as I'm watching it right now, but I can't give you much more other than that. But, fine get for a guy that we're ready to just kind of cast aside anyways.
Yeah. We have inevitably gotten to the Jazz Chisholm trade, and we only know it's Agustin Ramirez. So there are two other guys that have yet to be named. I promise on the next episode we will talk about the two more guys.
Jared Serna.
Oh, really?
Where'd you see which that? Is really funny because I think we did a mock trade on the Just Baseball show, and I don't think it was for Jazz though. I'm trying to remember what we did, but it was Agustin Ramirez and it was Jared Serna. It might have been for Tanner Scott and okay. Something else. But here it is, Agustin Ramirez and Jared Serna.
Is there one more? Have you seen the third guy?
All I've seen now is Serna.
Okay.
So maybe by the time we go through Agustin Ramirez and Jared Serna, we can maybe get to find out who the third player is.
Maybe. We'll set the stage for Agustin Ramirez here. Agustin Ramirez, 22-year-old catcher. Agustin, 58 games in AA this year, 29 games in AAA. This guy's an 860 OPS, already has 20 homers in 87 games, hitting 270. He was hitting 290 with 16 in 58 games in Somerset, 29 games hitting 224 in Scranton, a 693 OPS, which is below league average there. But again, he's a 22-year-old catcher that just got up to AAA for the first time. He's always been a good offensive catcher. How's the defense? Have you dove into that a decent bit or no?
It's not great, but I still think that there's time on that front. And at the very least, here's the funny thing is, people are very excited about De Los Santos, on the offensive side of things. And I get it because he's been far more productive than Agustin Ramirez. But I think Agustin Ramirez's bat translates to the big league level more as a higher likelihood of translating at the big league level than Deyvison. So there is always the fallback that he could play first. He's 6 feet tall. He's still a decent athlete. We talked about him last year, going into this year, because he was starting to show some big time EVs, continue to come up at any time I was sorting by, 90th percentile or even average EVs. It's like, man, this guy really clobbers the ball, but the swing had always been kind of steep. And it resulted in a higher ground ball rate. It still kind of is, but he made some adjustments to be able to elevate more. 48% ground ball rate's a little bit higher than you want, but he cut it down enough to where you're seeing him now translate into game power, which is 20 home runs, as we've seen this year. 90th percentile exit velocity of 108 miles an hour, though, on the season. That'll be one of the higher figures in the Marlins organization, period. And the fact that he also posts average contact rates, it's really encouraging. We knew the Marlins were going to try to add a catcher. And that's why when we did the mock trades on the Just Baseball show, I was like, I think if the Marlins are trading with the Yankees, they're going to want Agustin Ramirez, which is funny. Here he comes. I didn't know it would be for Jazz, but, I feel like for the Marlins, this is a guy that could end up catching for them by the end of this year. The defense does need to come along a little bit more, but he's 22. He's athletic. The receiving has gotten better. But I'll have to dig into that a little bit more, but I do know that it's come along from last year. And, it's hard to deny the bat this season as well, which is, another really exciting part because you want a big league piece one way or another. And it looks like Ramirez can be at least that. But I think the glove has come along enough to where he can be a catcher for them and at least an average one.
Totally unrelated. Did you see Christian Bethancourt of his contract selected by the Cubs?
No.
It's like the worst catching situation in baseball.
They just keep
those two, right? The Marlins and the Cubs, the two worst at Tampa, three worst catching situations in all of baseball.
Yep. And my concern with Ramirez too is can he limit the run game a little bit better? Sometimes the catch and throw isn't great. The blocking has gotten good. So I think he's going to be a guy that spends most of this year in AAA, just because why not? Why not have him just continue to grind the defense down there and not have to worry about trying to survive at the big league level? The season's already lost for the Marlins anyway. If he can get to the point where the catching is, at least fringe average or passable, I think he could be a solid piece for them. We've seen guys like Austin Wells progress defensively. We've seen them even get Ben Rice to a point where I know they don't need him as a catcher, but he was getting to the point where he was passable. I think Ramirez can be that as well. And even if it's a 45 glove with the bat and the power potential, that would be a really nice addition for the Marlins.
Last but certainly not least is Jared Serna, who is the owner of a 3-homer game this year. Jared Serna, 22 years old. He was in high A Hudson Valley for the entirety of this year. 88 games, a 785 OPS, hitting 253, 26 doubles, 13 homers, driven in 58. He keeps the strikeouts in check too. He's a smaller guy. He's 5'7", 168. Is that the listed height and weight you have for him?
Yep.
That's crazy that he's produced 13 homers this year.
90th percentile of 104. He gets into it.
5'7", 170, man.
He gets into it. And you know what the funny thing about him is, remember we were talking about it, he's like one of the most unlikely candidates to have a handful of like multi-home run games this year. Thing is, a 3-homer game, and if I'm not mistaken, a 3-homer game and a 2-homer game. Yeah. Which is funny because, he's just never been a guy that hits a ton of homers, but the EVs jumping this year has helped a lot. He's also been playing a lot of shortstop. So I got to look into the glove more, but the fact that he's been playing a consistent shortstop in high A for the Yankees is encouraging. He's played all over, and he was the guy that we talked about during the offseason. I think he played more baseball games than anybody on the planet last year. Yeah. I'm pretty sure he played 200 games.
I've got it here. 122 between low A and high A, then 61 in the Mexican Winter League. That's crazy. He loves ball.
And, the contact rates are above average. The EVs being actually above average at this point with his size and his profile is, I think, really encouraging. And he elevates. I actually really like the batted ball profile. He drives it to all fields. It's another guy that just does a pretty good job of pulling it in the air. I think he's immediately one of the Marlins' better infield prospects. And I know the ceiling might not be that high, but 22 years old and turned 22 in June, doing what he's doing, I know the 253 batting average looks a little bit lower, but the contact rates point towards that being a little bit better. But the fact that he's been able to tap into so much more power this year, I think really elevates the profile, especially while playing shortstop.
Yeah. Okay. Last thing that I've got for you. One top 100 prospect that is on the move. Who is it?
That hasn't been on the move
right now. It's that will be on the move in the next, 72 hours.
What's the prediction?
Yeah.
Do you have one first?
I think Rushing.
Okay. That's a good one.
I think Dalton Rushing of the Dodgers is gone. Figure we should probably say full name and team, but Dalton Rushing of the Dodgers. Will Smith just got a 10-year deal. They churn these guys out. Tyrone Lorenzo already looks awesome. Defensively, he's got a way to go, but they figure it out, man. And Hunter Fiducia just got up for his big league debut. They're going to piece it together. They'll find the heir to the Austin Barnes throne, have Smith catch, and have Lorenzo ready to go, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think that's one that if there's the right opportunity for them, makes all the sense in the world. I'm trying to think on the Cardinals front. Sajazi's, the way he's played this year has kind of pushed him out of maybe a lot of top 100 consideration, but I think Thomas Sajazi would be a guy that I wouldn't be shocked to see moved, especially with JJ Weatherholt being drafted and could be in AAA by, next year. He could be assigned to AAA to start the year next year. So Sajazi's a guy that I would not be shocked to see moved. And then I also look at the Astros. I think they're going to, especially now, I think they're going to make a move. They got to counter that Mariners move as well. And I could see Melton getting traded. I could see Baez getting traded. I could see both of them getting moved. So that's another one where I think it would not be surprising at all to see the Astros package both Melton and Baez there and send them out of town, which, I think would be kind of a good time to cash in on them because there's a chance that Melton kind of stalls out. Baez, you don't know how he's going to handle, the upper levels. Yep. Might be the time to cash in if you have the right opportunity to make this team better for now and moving forward. It's kind of the last hurrah with at least some of the players in this core.
One more for you, Aidan Miller. I think Aidan Miller
could. Think they do it?
He could be the biggest prospect move at the deadline. I think from April 15th to now, we look at the Phillies farm system entirely different.
Yeah.
Entirely. They've had Clasen breakout. I'm not saying that Clasen is a top 5 prospect in their organization, but we didn't know who Kaba and Tait were, and we just lauded them last episode.
Yeah, Kaba's a top 100 guy, and Tait probably should be. So
I think if Aidan Miller's the deal breaker to go get a star, if they're going to make a move for a star, I think it would probably be Aidan Miller's the headline.
I think it would have to be a star, but otherwise, like, I do think Justin Crawford could very well be on the go
for sure.
And like, it would make sense for him to be on the move. Like, he's performed well. I don't like how much he puts the ball on the ground, but another team might think that they can help him elevate and tap into that actually intriguing raw power. Crawford's one that I wouldn't be shocked to see go. What's crazy is we have not gotten that third piece yet, and I imagine that it's not going to be anything too notable. Like, how much more are they going to get? And I think, again, people are probably a little bit mixed on Ramirez. Like, I saw MLB Pipeline has him ranked as the 20th Yankees prospect. I'm pretty sure Baseball Prospectus has him as a top 50 prospect. I'm pretty sure, Fangraphs has him somewhere in between those two. Baseball America, I'm pretty sure had him as the third ranked prospect in the Yankee system. I lean towards the third ranked prospect in the Yankees, maybe a little bit lower than that. But I think he's another guy that instantly becomes a top 5 prospect in the Marlins system, and potentially like number 4 prospect in their system, maybe even a little bit better than that. The Yankee system's better. So, I think the fact that he was that high for BA tells you, what they think of him. I'm probably a little bit lower, but still it's a really solid headliner. He's not the 20th ranked prospect in the Yankee system at this point. And I think that's just because he hasn't been updated yet.
Yeah.
We'll catch up on the third piece and dive deeper into everything. And I'll catch up a little bit more on like the Agustin Ramirez defensive tape and all that stuff. But again, just another bat that is instantly one of the higher upside bats they have in that organization, and Serna as well. Just a much needed, solid, well-rounded bat. We're going to have a lot more trades coming in, and we're going to be breaking them down all next week over multiple episodes. We also have that Braxton Ashcraft episode coming out sometime next week as well. Any final thoughts, Jack?
I don't think so. It's been fun to have an early start. I was worried we were going to get nothing, and then way too much for one episode. But now, like, it feels like we've almost gotten the front half of the deadline out of the way, and we can wait for the back half.
Yep, and I'm excited. I'm actually glad it's picked up the way that it has. Hopefully it keeps moving, and I'm excited to keep breaking these down. It's one of my favorite things to do all year. Keep in tune with justbaseball.com as well. We'll be continuing to break stuff down there. Finally going to have an updated top 100 at some point next week, but more importantly, going to be writing up a lot of these trades, breaking down a lot of these prospects as they get moved around, and of course on here as well. So always, thank you for listening. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we look forward to talking prospects with you all next week.